Welcome, everyone. My name is Helen, and I'm a volunteer with the Spiritist Society of Melbourne. And today we are here to talk about the topic true happiness. And I'm a volunteer of the Spiritist Society of Melbourne, and I'm a student of the Spiritist philosophy. And what I'm going to share here today is my perspective or my understanding on this topic based on the Spiritist philosophy and the books from the Spiritist philosophy. So it might differ from other people's views because we're all in different steps of our journey. So it might be that there are other people that will understand differently the topic from what I understood, and even people from this group. So let's start with this question. What is unhappiness in your understanding? So have a quick think and see what comes in your mind, what ideas, what is unhappiness? We're going to explore that. The other question that we also hope to answer by the end of today's conversation is, how does a higher order spirit define unhappiness? Would they see unhappiness different than what we see as unhappiness? Or would they agree with us sometimes, but sometimes they would disagree with what we understand as unhappiness? And finally, what do we understand as happiness? So what is happiness in your understanding? I believe all of us, we are seeking our happiness and happiness for those who we love. And studying this philosophy, we know that happiness has different aspects. And that's what we're going to be looking at. And for today's discussion, I based myself on the Spirit's book, and I'll be talking about which questions I use from the Spirit's book and what topics we are covering from the Spirit's book, so we could discuss what we have here to say. I always like to start defining a few concepts. So some people that are listening to this are not new to Spiritism, and they would know what these concepts are for the Spiritist philosophy. But very briefly, I'm just going to go over these three concepts because we're going to be talking about them and how they are linked to what true happiness might be. So the first one is God. And what we're going to discuss is in the Spirit's book, question 1 onward. So chapter 1 is talking about God, and we are going to start with that very briefly because we always start with that. The second one is the law of progress, and that can be found in the Spirit's book as well, in part 3, chapter 8. And the last one is reincarnation, which is also in the Spirit's book from question 166 onwards. And I heard a definition of the Spirit's book that I really like, because some people might ask, well, what is the Spirit's book? And someone said that the Spirit's book is the greatest interview of all times. So imagine if you could ask questions, or if you could interview people who have departed from this life and are living a different life in a different realm, and they could answer questions that we might ask. And that's exactly what Allan Kardec did. And he compiled the answers. And the answers that agreed, he compiled into the Spirit's book. Okay, so that's what the Spirit's book is. The greatest interview of all times, and that we should all read. So let's start with what is God. So according to the Spiritist philosophy, God is the supreme intelligence and first cause of all things. And that's what we mean when we refer to the term God. But most importantly, and what I want to talk about today, is the attributes. So Allan Kardec first started with that first question, what is God? But then he explored a little bit more, because it's very hard to understand sometimes the concept, because the spirits themselves tell us that we can't fully grasp the concept of God. And I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Wayne Dyer, and he says that the Tao that can be defined is not the Tao. So when you name something, you create a concept, and that is not the concept itself. And I put this picture, let me just go back here. I put this picture of the universe, but God is not the universe. Kardec even asked that question to the spirits, but I put that in because of the lack of another image that would represent the infinity of God. So what I wanted to focus on is the attributes of God, because that's what's going to help us understand the concept of happiness and unhappiness. And I'm going to focus on one specifically, which is God being sovereignly just and good. So that is one of the attributes of God, and the spirits confirmed with Kardec that that was true. And much more than that. It's just because we didn't have the capacity to understand more because of the level of development that we are in. The next important concept is the law of progress. So the law of progress is a natural law, and that information, like I said, can be found in the Spirit's book when they talk about the natural laws or the divine laws. And the law of progress is what states that we are on a continuum of development. So the spirits tell us that we started as simple and ignorant, and then slowly we're developing towards perfection. And in question 779, which is the one that I wrote here, Kardec asked the spirits about if humans, they have that innate power in themselves to progress, or is it more a result of education, like you can see in the question? And the spirits answered that they advance naturally by themselves. Not all progress at the same time or in the same manner. However, it is through social contact that the most advanced help the others to progress. So it's natural in us, but not everyone progresses in the same manner or same rhythm. And through social contact is where the people who have progressed or advanced more in their development, they can come and help others. Now, there's another aspect here of the law of progress, which is biological and spiritual progress. So it's very easy for humanity to look at our biological progress, isn't it? So we can see that we came from very primitive bodies, and slowly our body progressed and developed into what we are today. And we can even find evidence in archaeology and through studies that our bodies have been developing. But this is not the main focus that we are looking at today. And there's an important point about the biological progress, is that the biological progress actually happens to accommodate the development of the spirit. So as we develop as spirits, our bodies have to be able to accommodate a more developed spirit, and it evolves as well. But what we really want to focus is on the spiritual progress and intellectual moral progress. And in question 780, which is the next question after the previous one that I read, Kardec asked the spirits if moral progress always follows intellectual progress. So do we progress? What do you guys think? Well, we can see clearly that that doesn't happen, isn't it? We can see that we might progress intellectually, but morally it might take a longer time. So it's the Spirit's answers that it is a consequence because we understand concepts that will help us develop morally, but it's not linked, like you're developing intellectually. So if you're very intellectually developed, that doesn't mean that you're morally developed. So the first concept was God. The second concept was the law of progress. And the third concept is reincarnation. And why is it important for us to understand reincarnation? As I said, the law of progress states that all beings are progressing. Everything is progressing, everything. And this progression happens through our incarnations. So Kardec in question 166, he asked, how can a soul who did not reach perfection during its corporeal life complete the work of its purification? So the spirits answered that by submitting to the trial of a new existence, meaning that the spirit is born again. And in the same question, there are sub-questions. And one of them says or asks, Kardec asks the spirits, then does the soul live many corporeal existence? And the spirit says, yes. We all live many lives, and those who say otherwise wish to keep you in the ignorance in which they themselves dwell. That's their desire. So people who say otherwise, either they're not aware and they're very comfortable with that view. However, that's not true. And we're going to see here today that there's already evidence of reincarnation. And people don't see it because, honestly, they don't want to, or because it's very easy to continue in your own point of view. So reincarnation is the principle where your soul, and we can see that in the photo, goes through different existences. The photo that's showing is this woman and her previous incarnations. Coincidentally, they are all in the body of women. But when you reincarnate, the choice of the body, the gender, the culture, the social status that you choose when you reincarnate depends on what you want to develop in your life. So it's not because you were born a man in this incarnation that the next one you will continue to be born a man. It really depends on what is it that you are looking to develop as a soul. And you might be born in different nationalities as well, different cultures, different religious groups or belief systems, because that's how you are raised. So that really doesn't matter. It matters is what your goals are for your incarnation and what will benefit you the most. And it's so interesting because I was listening to a psychiatrist talk today. His name is Gabor Mate, and he was talking about, he's a psychiatrist with his specialty is trauma, especially childhood trauma. And it's interesting that he was speaking to professionals in his area, and he worked as a doctor, and now he works with psychotherapy. And he was speaking to a group of doctors, and he was saying, now we know, we have research to show how linked it is, our emotions and what's going inside us with our illnesses. And also, and he said, using this term, how our higher self, and you can look that up. He was talking about a book of his, oh my God, what is the name of the book? Anyways, but in one of his talks, he says, your higher self loves you so much that in your life, it brings what you need to transform yourself and to connect back to your higher self. And I thought that that was very interesting because he was speaking to a group of doctors. And he said, you may not agree with what I'm saying, but I imagine by the end of my talk, you will. Because he said that there is research. Some people just don't want to look at the research. So what research is there on reincarnation, and what are the current evidences? Is there any research? Yes, there is. So Dr. Brian Weiss is, he's still alive. He's a hypnotherapist. He's a psychiatrist, psychologist. And during his time with his regressions, because he would hypnotize people to try to solve their problems, he accidentally accessed people's past lives. So he wrote these 5 books. So Many Lives, Many Masters. I think it was the first, or the most famous one, at least it was the one that I heard of. I really thought that this title was interesting. Only Love is Real. Same Soul, Many Bodies, where he really talks about reincarnation. And because he had that many people come to him, and after he started noticing that it couldn't be coincidence that he could access other lives and people truly believe, because he didn't believe in anything, then he started researching around the world what was out there. And this other photo right next to Dr. Brian Weiss's books is from the University of Virginia, and they have a division of perceptual studies. And this is a page where they give advice to parents of children who are spontaneously recalling past life memories. Isn't that interesting? So some children, they recall spontaneously memories from a different lifetime. And there is thorough research on that, thorough research. And some people say, but that's just anecdotal evidence. And I'm going to use the words of Dr. Gabor Mate, which I saw his lecture today. He said, yes, but if you have that many anecdotal evidence, it's pointing towards something and people should look at it. And depending on the amount, it actually proves something. So there are many young children that recall. There are even adults that spontaneously recall a past life. They have a memory from a past life. So these are just a couple of evidences and research that are being done by doctors, psychologists, and people that study patterns that they've been noticing that they can't truly explain with what science has available now. So they go on to do this research, and we have these theories of reincarnation and what might happen with the connected lives. So now that we have these concepts, because I wanted everyone to be on the same kind of understanding of what God is as the supreme intelligence that everything came from that supreme intelligence, that there is a law that is a divine law that states that we are all progressing towards perfection, and we started simple and ignorance as beings, and we're developing. And finally, reincarnation, which states that we come several times to the physical plane in order to develop or get rid of ideas that don't serve us and adopt ideas that do serve us. So now we're going to return to one of the initial questions. I imagine that you have already thought a little bit of what unhappiness is for you. So how does a higher order spirit define unhappiness? And I'm going to use the example of one higher spirit called Joana de Angelis. And Joana de Angelis is a higher spirit that communicates through a medium called Divaldo Franco. And he has published so many books that Joana de Angelis helped through mediumship. And her focus is more aligned with Jung and psychology and the things that we have to change within ourselves so we can truly find our happiness. And this quote is found in the book called Jesus and the Gospel in Light of Profound Psychology, where she links traditional psychology to the spiritual aspect of our being, which is our true self. So Joana de Angelis says, when you are responsible for someone's misfortune, when you betray someone's trust, when you slander, when you invest against another's ethical values, when you sow suffering, ridicule someone, that is what we call true disgrace. So in this chapter of the book, she really focuses on what true disgrace is. She says that sometimes we go through suffering and through extreme challenges, and she acknowledges that that is a source of unhappiness for us during the period that we're going through that challenge. And then she states this, that's written, that true unhappiness or true disgrace is when we are disrespecting another human being and we are the cause. And she justifies saying that it is a true misfortune or true disgrace. That's the word she used in the title, because we will have to face our conscience, where all the moral laws are engraved. And we're also going to face the cosmic conscious, meaning the divine laws. So if we are not aligned with the divine laws, that is true suffering because it has consequences. Whereas when we are going through the trials, through the tribulations, through challenges, it's not minimizing that in any way. It's just that if we can navigate through that, we are not sowing anything that we will reap in the future. Whereas when we are the cause, we are the authors of suffering, we're planting that, then moving forward, there's a point where we have to reap what we sowed, isn't it? So isn't that interesting? Was that something aligned with what you thought? Because Joana Angelis said that there's these two aspects, the suffering that we receive and the suffering that we cause. And for them, for the higher spirits, the suffering that you cause to another is what is true unhappiness. Although we might perceive that the suffering that we receive or that we feel is true unhappiness. And that's food for thought. And it might be that what I discuss here today, you might not agree, you might agree, but it is another input or another point of view. And it's not me saying, I'm really getting this from the Spiritist philosophy. Okay, now we saw what unhappiness is. So what is true happiness in the eyes of higher spirits? So if we look at Hamed in Changing Attitudes, and we have a series of video on this book, Changing Attitudes. So the second episode or the second chapter talks about happiness, about being happy. And in this chapter, I took a small quote that says that the true formula for happiness is the constant effort of working within ourselves. So that's the true formula for happiness. That when we are looking within and trying to understand ourselves and questioning what we believe to be right or wrong, and to question ourselves if this or that is the best way to proceed, that's where the formula for happiness is. So according to them, it's when you are moving forward. So when you are moving towards, when you're aligned with the law of progress, that's when you will find or you will feel happiness. And it's not that you're not going to have challenges, because in the Spirit's book, when they talk about happiness, and the Spirits say that, Kardec asks, can you truly be happy on earth? And the Spirit says, you can have a relative happiness, but you can't be fully happy in the state that we are, and with all the suffering around us, with the understanding that we have. Because if we can't understand that when we suffer, that is not necessarily unhappiness, but when we cause suffering, that is unhappiness, then it's hard for us to be fully happy on earth. It doesn't mean that we won't get there, because that's where we're going. So when we're moving forward, that's when we are on the path of true happiness. And we'll finalize with this quote from Changing Attitudes as well, that happiness isn't a matter of circumstance, of being alone or with someone. It is a behavioral attitude in face of the tasks we came to fulfill on earth. So it's very easy to link happiness with what's happening around us, with our circumstances. So if we don't have trouble or nothing is bothering us, we're healthy, we perceive that as happiness. But once that is disrupted, we feel that that is unhappiness. And that's where the concept that the higher spirits have of what happiness is can come teach us or show us a different point of view, because it isn't one individual higher spirit saying that. It's many saying the same thing, that we have a relative happiness on earth, But when we are looking inwards and we are doing what we came here to do, which according to the Spirit's book, in the question related to reincarnation, what the purpose of reincarnation is, which is to move forward, like I said, towards perfection, and at the same time contribute and be co-creators to a better place or to the universe. That's where true happiness is. So it's an attitude when we are facing the tasks that we came to fulfill on earth. Although sometimes these tasks that we came to fulfill on earth seem incredibly unhappy to us, but if we're diligent and we have patience with ourselves and the circumstances, and we trust and we have faith that that is aligned with our growth and our development, then that is when we start feeling a glimpse of what's coming ahead, which is our true happiness. Thank you, everyone. And I hope I gave some concepts that might give you a different point of view, and you found something of value in what we discussed here today. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.